Well, hello, welcome to Books of the Month. I'm Dr. Larry Carnes. We are so excited and glad that you could join us for our broadcast today. We have the privilege and the honor of having Ernie with us, and we're going to be looking at this exciting book that he has, is Everyone at the Table. Ernie, welcome. How are you today?
Thank you very much, Larry. I'm very excited and honored myself and privileged to be with you and authors Tranquility Press.
We are honored to have you. Do us a favor and introduce yourself to our audience and tell them a little bit about who Ernie is.
Well, my name is Ernest G. Tannis. I was born in Ottawa. My father's homeland is Lebanon. My mother's parents are from Syria, but I was born in Ottawa. And I've been practicing law for 46 years all over the world, doing a lot of mediation, which has resulted in this book, is Everyone at the Table, 18 Life Lessons in Problem Solving. They're real life mediations, individual, international, and institutional, including just couples, business people, and 4 chapters on work with the Native communities. So there's a lot of wisdom there. And I just ceased my law practice of January 1st of this year, moving into education. So this process with the Tranquility Press and yourself and your good group there is perfectly in line with my new transition to a new career in my life.
Well, that's awesome. And we're so excited to be a part of you transitioning into this new stage of your life. Now, this book, I looked at it. You talk about 18 lively real life stories that are based on actual interventions. Let me ask you this. Why the title is Everyone at the Table? What does that say? Why does that resonate with you?
That's an excellent question. So chapter 1 of the book is the answer to that question. And in that, to be in a summary, there was a Civil War situation. I was invited after that to meet with all the military, the police, government leaders, and about 100 stakeholders. And they asked me to comment on conflict resolution generally, not on the issues in the dispute. People were killed and there was guns and police from different states, New York State, Quebec, Ontario, both militaries. It was a very complex situation. So I was asked to talk about general principles of conflict resolution that could apply, as Roger Fisher and Bill Urey wrote in 1981, Getting to Yes, that whether you're a couple or you're a community or it's international, they're all the same principles. So in my 10 minutes I said, I don't doubt that this meeting was very carefully organized in a very profound way with all these levels of government and people. But I have one question. Is everyone at the table? I asked that openly because I said very often someone's not invited or someone is invited, but they didn't want to make it for some reason. But when you miss a stakeholder, it could unravel things. And I said, I just asking, is everyone at the table? So the next day, a group called from this one native territory to another one I was working with, and they said, can we use Ernest Tannis's quote to write to the Minister of Indian Affairs? Because our group was not invited. Now, often people are not invited because other groups don't think they should be invited. But in another chapter, I say, if you don't get everyone to the table and everyone else goes to celebrate their resolution, the people who weren't invited, who are in the basement, blow the house up. So what happened was that comment went to the Minister of Indian Affairs. It caused a lot of challenging times. And that is what sparked the title of the book, was that question.
Wow. Now that's powerful. You spoke volumes and you touched on so many things. So if I'm not invited to the table, of course, I'm not going to have a voice. And then if I'm not invited to the table, there's a possibility that it's going to speak to me and tell me that I'm insignificant. Yes. But when you ask that question, I'm sensing that you valued and deemed everyone as having value, having purpose, and having significance. Would that be an accurate assessment?
It is very accurate, Larry. And what a follow-up is, I had a situation where it was another civil strife situation, and the group that brought us on with the Canadian Institute for Conflict Resolution, which I was the executive director from 1989 to 1992, they said they didn't want this other group to be invited to do the mediation. I said, Well, in conjunction with the Tom Colosi, who passed away, with the American Arbitration Association, I had to get some mentoring because I was sort of plunged into my first mediation, and wrote a letter and said, if you do not invite this other group, we are not going to do the mediation because you're not going to be able to resolve your community for your next generations. You know, the Native people do everything for the next 7 generations. And it's not the right way to start, even though you feel that way. But if you want us to get involved, we manage the process, you manage the issues. Otherwise, we're not going to get involved. It was a very tough thing to say, but that's what they did. They said, okay. And then that big group eventually got in and said, how come you took so long to see us? And I said, I had to deal with this other group. And fortunately, I showed them the letter that was sent. And then in anticipation that they were feeling, well, why weren't we invited to the table? That answered the question. So that was a very vivid example on, you have to keep an empty chair, which is the cover of the book. And you have to ask another question to everyone is at the table. Say, who else should be at the table? Everyone has to ask that question. And you never stop asking that question.
So now that's a powerful question. Who else should be at the table? Now, would you then give each person an opportunity at the table to respond to that question?
Yes. And in fact, part of the process, I always say that I don't form an opinion on the conflict. My opinion is on the process. And that's what they're looking to me to do as a neutral. So when that question is asked and you say, who else should be here? Then everyone has to say who else should be there. Or they're going to say, no, I don't know anyone else. But it's got to be open to make sure that everyone's thinking collectively. This is a community. And if somebody says, I want this person at the table, and somebody says, I don't know why, then you have a sub issue. So we say, why do you want this person or not want this person? And then I could look at that. If they're a stakeholder that has an effect on the outcome and will be affected by the outcome, then we have to do a sub-mediation on that issue. And we never stop going around the table till everyone has mentioned who should be there or who they don't want to be there and why. So at the end of the day, when people cannot, at first, this is a key thing, Larry, that I've learned. People cannot agree on the issue. So you always start with the process. So when they can agree on the process, they've agreed to something. And that's a powerful psychological tool. And that sets it off in the right way.
So that's powerful, speaks volumes, because before we even tackle or address the issues, let's have a convergence on agreeing on the process. That's
what they call a bullseye observation, Larry, because a famous Canadian psychologist, Fisher, is a professor. I did a panel, MC of a panel was on in Washington, and he said something I'll never forget. Before you talk about the issue, talk about how you're going to talk about the issue. Now that breakthrough thinking changes the whole perspective, and you get people to finally agree on something. And then, oh, we can't agree on something. So once they've agreed on the process, and there's never an end asking questions about the process. It should always be adapted. And then every stakeholder has to go through a similar conflict resolution training. So when they get to the table, they all are working from the same principles.
That's powerful. You know, many times when I'm speaking with people, speaking to groups, I say, okay, let's do this. The first conflict that has to be resolved is the internal conflict that we're having with ourselves.
That's right.
Because if we can't resolve that internal conflict, we're definitely not going to be able to resolve external conflicts. So I'd like to make it personal. What is it about you that you can't come in agreement with? And why do you find, is there a possibility that you're the toxic component in the entire thing?
That's right.
That is so powerful.
Yeah.
I'm looking here. You talked about captivating personal antidotes combined with down-to-earth life lessons make this an indispensable hands-on guide to creative conflict resolution. Powerful statement, powerful statement. Address that for us, if you will.
So a number of things you've made me think about. First of all, in terms of the principles, you want to point the finger. No, you want to point the way. So they got to kind of change that. You don't put on your gloves, you roll up your sleeves. So you got to change the language, and those things make a difference. So the objective is always to do that. And what you just said is very, very important. One of the original quotes in my book that I like, everyone has their own, but is world peace through inner peace. You got to start with yourself.
Yes.
In my book, I quote a very famous story about a general, and his army was beating everybody. And as they were going back to celebrate to their homeland, he said, "You haven't fought the best and most important and hardest battle of all, the battle within yourself." So
Wow.
that is a very good insight, Larry. That's a very important person to find out what's in you about driving this. Why are you shooting at people? Why are people being killed? Why is this conflict? And in some of these cases, there's 18 different stakeholders. So it's a very, very big project. But once you get people on the process, it moves. And I was very, very honored in my life because I left the lucrative law practice in '85. I saw very little justice in the legal system to learn about what Jesus meant by mediation. And then when I worked with this Native community for 2-3 years, after a very serious problem, they were in New York State, Quebec, Ontario, United States, Canada. They gave me an Indian name at a surprise dinner. And it was like so phenomenal. I was so honored, and I think it saved my life.
Wow, that's powerful. We have about 60 seconds left. And see what I hear you saying, and I can sense how emotional you got when you talked about that. So it had value and it had significance to you. And so that is so powerful. You know, people so appreciate you when you value them, when you show them that they have worth, they're significant.
Right.
And so I think that's something that I'm receiving from you. You've dedicated your life to making people feel valuable and feel significant. Take 40 seconds and tell people how they can contact you, if there's a website, an email, anything like that, and how they can get this awesome book.
Well, the email is Ernest, E-R-N-E-S-T-G as in George or gorgeous, Tannis, T-A-N-N-I-S, and put the number 3. That's my executive assistant, Jeanette Riken, at gmail.com. And that's the best way to connect. And there's other, if you look me up on Google and stuff, there's a lot of things there. But I think if someone wants to do a direct connection, that would be the email to send it to.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Well, Ernie, I tell you, it's been a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you so much. A wealth of information, and we thank you for your commitment to society and to people.
Yeah, thank you.
And so what you're doing is really bridging the gap that needs to be bridged. So thank you so much for being with us. Yeah. And we are sure that people want to go and get this awesome book. It's so powerful. It's everyone at the table. I'm Dr. Larry Carnes. Thank you for being with us here at Books of the Month. And don't go anyplace. We'll be right back.